welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast, your guide to help you manage life, money, and multiples. Each episode, host Paul Fenner, Tama Capital's president and founder, and the proud parent of 4 amazing children, including 1 set of triplets, will provide insights on successfully sustaining an active lifestyle, career, and family through comprehensive wealth management strategies, financial education, and lifestyle planning, specific to parents raising twins, triplets, and more. Learn more, subscribe to the show, or connect with Paul at tamacapital.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of TAMA may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
As parents, what does it mean to have harmony between your personal and financial life? A demanding career, demanding kids, a demanding spouse? As a mom of 4, including a set of twins, Marisa Lonic checked all those boxes, except maybe the demanding husband piece. But she was also asking, what about me? Marisa, like most parents, was not in a position to just quit her job and start something new, especially considering that her career was part of her ambitious self. However, eventually she transitioned from her full-time corporate career into her own business. Throughout our conversation, Marisa shares great advice on developing reasonable objectives that work with your current lifestyle, finding an accountability partner, and recognizing and managing your inner work to achieve long-term success. Please enjoy my conversation with Marisa Lonic. Well, Marisa Lonic, welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. As we were talking before we hit record, I've actually had several conversations lately with moms with a lot of kids like ourselves. So I know you have 4, and most of my audience knows by now I have 4 in a unique set of ways with the triplets plus 1. But one of the things I was really excited about having this conversation, and I'm hoping that a few of my family office clients, I'll put it that way without naming names, will get a lot out of this conversation, because in going through your website and your bio and looking back at how you got to where you are today, and I'll let you explain for the listeners, but you went from having multiple kids, corporate job, demands of caring for your family, but yet you were just drowning, for lack of a better term, and trying to figure out like how to, and I hate the word balance because I don't think there is such a thing, but to try to find harmony is the word that I typically use with, managing everything. So I'm really excited to have you on to talk about your story and the work that you do now. So with that being said, where do we find you today?
Yeah, so my website is the best place to find me. It's mamaworkit.com, MAMA. Or are you asking about my actual location?
Well, we'll get to that too, but I was actually mentioning your actual location, but we'll get to your website too.
Okay, yes. Well, so I am in the Bay Area of California, originally an East Coaster, a New Yorker, but moved out here 7 years ago.
I would imagine that would have been a big transition.
A huge transition, and a one that really sparked a lot of what I do today, to be honest.
And how so? Like, what were the driving points behind that?
Yeah. So 7+ years ago, I was living in New York. I was a mom of twin toddlers at the time, working corporate job, think outside looking in, looked like I had it pretty much together, but inside feeling that hot mess express kind of term we hear thrown around, just really feeling unbalanced, overwhelmed, like I was always playing catch up, like I was putting myself last all the time and feeling resentful and all the icky feelings that come with that. And as an ambitious person as well, wanting to grow in my career without sacrificing potentially time and energy with my family as well. So I was in kind of a rough spot. And I was offered a job promotion within the organization that I worked for, which was headquartered in California, even though I was working in New York, New Jersey area. And I was super excited about the opportunity, yet I was also terrified because I thought to myself, well, I already feel like I don't have it together right now. And now I'd be taking on a longer commute, a new city, more responsibility at work. How could I ever make this work? And I contemplated a lot on whether or not I should take that job. And I mean, lots of overthinking, lots of conversations with my husband, and initially I turned it down and I was plagued with regret. I mean, the entire weekend just felt terrible about the decision. My husband saw it all over my face and he was like, well, God, let's just try it. Let's just do it. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Right. So Monday morning, I'm calling my boss and I'm like, please reinstate this position. I really actually want it. Change my mind. Just kidding. And luckily, they were able to do that. And so our family moved cross country, literally one coast to the other. And what I realized when I got here is that managing my time didn't necessarily get harder. It just got different. And the fact that I was feeling really fulfilled in what I was doing at work and kind of driving my ambition and being true to that part of myself, it allowed for me to be so much more efficient, show up much more intentionally with my family and in my work too, and just balance things in a much better way. And so through that, I started, and of course, I'm not going to say every day was great. I mean, the struggle is real. We all get that. But I was really able to see things from a different perspective, a new light. And that's when I started sort of blogging for the working parent world, working mom world, and writing and then sharing stories and experiences. And my business really was born from there.
So let me go back. How was that? What was that conversation like with your husband?
My husband is such a supportive guy when it comes to things like that. And, I think it takes balance in any relationship. You have one person typically who's more of like the driver with certain things, or not even the driver, but just like the one who has more of the spearhead, right? And certain things. And you have one who's more like laid back and go with the flow. And that's us. Like I'm type A. That's who I am. I'm really like, I like to plan. I like to strategize and think about things like that. And my husband, he's more like, cool, that sounds good, and he's not like, of course he has an opinion and things like that. But, I think that component within our relationship works really well. And so I just love that about how I'll come with some crazy ideas sometimes. And trust me, I've had crazier ideas than moving cross country. I've started other businesses and he's, supported me and helped me with those ideas and things like that. And it's just kind of how we vibe.
So what was the spark, I guess, that made you start blogging to begin with? Because it sounds like that's really what started it all. So I guess one, what was the spark there, but then how did you do it from a time standpoint? Because you've already mentioned that you had twins, and I know now you have 4 kids. So yes. How did that work? Because that's one question I get all the time, whether you're a father or a mother. People have other ideas about what they want to do in life, but they don't necessarily know how to take that first step. And even if they do, they're really scared about taking it to begin with.
Yeah, well, I started that blog as a creative outlet. I did not have a business intention in mind. I really just wanted to share funny stories, hacks, ideas. And interestingly enough, I did it for 2 years, published it, but didn't tell anybody that it existed. So I wrote it as though I was talking to thousands of people. And I think probably like 3 people I told about it and they read it. So it really, to me, was sort of just processing things I was going through, thinking about how this could be helpful when I was ready to actually shout from the social media rooftops that it existed. And anything that I believe, anything that you are passionate about, that you really want to do, you will prioritize, because it's not so much a matter of not having the time. It's not having the clarity of what it is that you want to focus on. And a lot of people will throw that around. I don't have time. I myself have been guilty of that many times, using that phrase, thinking that, believing that. And truth of the matter is, we all get to choose what we prioritize every day. And that's not always an easy choice. I recognize that. We have responsibility. We're adults. We have to provide an income and go to work and, do the things we have to do. But when you really get down to the granular level of all that, it's a choice. We're making that choice. We're making that choice because we want to pay our mortgage. We're making that choice because we want to feed our family. We're making that choice because we love the career we're in, fill in the blank, whatever it is. But when you think about it from that perspective, you can make that choice. Like, you can choose to not mindlessly scroll and do a passion project. You can choose to actually, when you're playing with your kids, be there, be fully present, and not be multitasking email during that time. Like, that is a choice you get to make.
Yeah, that's one word I've tried to eliminate from my vocabulary probably about 8 months ago, was the term busy. Because everybody would always ask, well, how are you doing? I'm busy. And I cannot agree with you more. And that's one of I think one of the big pivots I made with my firm Tama probably about 3-4 years ago, is this relentless focus on working with families and getting them to understand, first and foremost, we need to set what your purpose and then supporting objectives are within not only your financial plan, but your personal life as well. Because I think a lot of people think that their personal life and their financial life are two different worlds. And in reality, they are extremely connected and intertwined with each other. And what people I have this phrase that this checkbook never lies. Show me your checkbook and I'll tell you what you prioritize, whether it's time, what you buy, whatever it may be. That's what it's going to tell me. And so it's been an interesting journey just in the evolution of my firm and getting people accustomed to this, where I think there's this continued stereotype out there about what a financial advisor does. And to bring it back to like what you were pointing out as well, it starts with defining your why, Simon Sinek, if you will, but you really your purpose. And then from there, you're supporting objectives and then tying them back to, a financial scorecard that I've put together.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I love that. Absolutely.
So one of the things I was kind of gleaming from what you said too, with your transition is with parents, I don't care if you're a mother or a father, I think there's this strong guilt that can come upon you. And I think that can be one of those things that gets in the way of really prioritizing not only what you want as an individual, but as a partner, as a spouse, as a parent. Walk us through how you work with people on potentially like overcoming some of those guilt. Obviously here, guilty mom syndrome. You probably don't hear as much about guilty father syndrome, but walk us through like how you actually work with the moms that come to you for help in that case.
Yeah, guilt, it's really unfortunate because it's there. It's like this uninvited guest that just shows up, stays too long, makes too much noise when the baby's sleeping, like just all the things that you don't want, but is present often, even in the back of your mind, even if you try to suppress it. So working parent guilt is real. And ways that we combat that in my programs or in my coaching is we really get to some root causes there. So I have something called the worthiness quiz that I developed that helps too, because it sort of makes us look within and think about, well, is this an external guilt thing, or is this actually me not feeling worthy enough in this moment to like put myself first or fill in the blank, what I want to prioritize here? Or am I allowing all these things to kind of interfere with my boundaries and lead the way, so to speak? So I almost cringe sometimes when I introduce myself as a time management and productivity coach, because I think people assume I'm all about like spreadsheets and calendars and things like that. And sure, I've got hacks, I've got resources I share, but if you don't get down to some of the inner work when it comes to things like this, like managing your guilt, especially for parents, you will not be successful in being able to feel like you are managing your time effectively, because you won't be able to sustain those behaviors long term.
Yeah, I've had Laura Vanderkam. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work or not, on the
Yes,
show a couple times, and she's actually got us outnumbered because I think Laura has like 5 kids at this point.
she does. Yes.
And like one of her points is like, uh, I think she feels a stereotype, as being known as a productivity time management expert is like people think, well, you must have all everything together yourself, and like no, like I struggled with this the same as with everybody else. When it comes to this guilt, well, obviously it's real, but do you see it as a roadblock that gets in people's way of identifying what their priorities are, what their purpose are, and rather than trying to say, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. Like if I feel guilty, I can use it as a crutch to say, well, I'm not going to prioritize myself or things I want to do.
1,000%. Yeah. And I've been guilty of this myself. I mean, I feel like the mom guilt, the parent guilt, like even when you have a good handle of it, it still shows up. So many times I've, declined invitations to fun things I would love to do, or, really second guessed how I'd RSVP. I have one story I share in my first book, Time Management, where I got invited to this. It was called Mom's Day Away or something like that. And it was, I live in Northern California, not far from Napa Valley. It was a day in Napa Valley. I mean, who would say no to that,
Yeah,
right?
that's hard to say no to. Yeah.
But when I got this Evite, I was, again, corporate working mom at the time, commuting several days per week. And Saturdays were typically my day where I was doing all the house stuff or like spending quality time with my family. And like, I had a routine. And so I got this invite and I didn't RSVP right away because I was feeling tons of guilt. Like, I can't believe I would just eliminate all these responsibilities or spend an entire day away from my kids when I barely see them during the week. Or, I had all these excuses creeping in. And it took someone calling me out because I was past the date of when I needed to respond to be like, are you coming or not? And I said yes. And it was like one of the best yeses I ever said, because it really put into perspective the fact that I'm not only doing this for me, like, because I need a day away and it was super fun and great to connect with other moms in that way, but I'm setting a good example. Do I want my kids to grow up and feel like, well, my mom never put herself first, so I guess that's what all adults do? No way. Like, I don't want to create a cycle, a generational cycle where this continues.
So one of the things I was thinking about when you were saying that is, and I had this thought earlier today when thinking about somebody in particular that's really struggling with what to do in their career. And when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And I think it kind of gets back to this idea of trying to figure out, prioritize, because when you know what you want to do, I think it becomes much easier to then put together a plan to get there. Can you walk us through maybe some, a few tips that you provide to the moms that you work with in your coaching on exactly like how to do that? Because I still think people get stuck in the minutia of maybe they have an idea of what they want to do, but it's still really hard to take that first step or two.
Oh, yes, it totally is. And especially as a parent, the mental load is heavy. There's a lot of stuff swirling around in there in the brain, and, you'll get an idea and then 3 seconds later, what was that? There's just so much happening in there. So the first thing I tell people to do, because clarity is really a prerequisite when you're managing your time, you got to be clear on how you want to spend your time, because if you're not, you're just going to end up wasting it away, filling it with things that really aren't moving you any closer to where you want to be. So I tell them to do a simple brainstorm, a brain dump, whatever you want to call it, like get everything out of here and onto paper, onto a spreadsheet, onto whatever feels good for you, your notes app, just get it out of your brain and just get it out. It doesn't have to be organized, anything, just hot mass list on a piece of paper, get it all out. And then how you approach that, because now this can feel overwhelming, right? A lot of people will be like, great, I have a to-do list, but then they freeze. They get analysis paralysis because it's lengthy. It's like CVS receipt length, right? So, yeah. So, I say, okay, don't get stuck in this space.
Now that I'm going to be stuck with that analogy, that picture in my head.
Yes,
so I just went to CVS this morning.
Those receipts are long. Now they even actually give you the option if you want one or not, right? So yeah, it's lengthy and there's so much on there and it's disorganized and people try to dive in or because they feel motivated in that moment, but then maybe the next day they're not as motivated and it feels overwhelming and they get stuck. And so my advice is focus on 3 small goals a day. 3 things, just 3 things you're going to hold yourself accountable for each and every day. If you feel like that day you want to be an overachiever and do more, great. But these are the 3 that you're going to be like laser focused on. These are the things you're going to fill when, you've got 5-10 minutes here or there. And maybe you would have normally opened up your phone and done something mindless. No, you know exactly what you need to get done. And so there's an accountability there. You do this by like highlighting or circling them. And then you allow yourself to also feel done at the end of the day, because I know there have been many nights where you go to bed and you felt busy all day long. And then you feel like, but I didn't get what I wanted to get done. Well, this is a way to ensure you have that clarity, you have that focus, and you kind of give yourself a pat on the back and you're allowed to feel proud of yourself for the day.
Yeah, I'm trying to work through this myself, and rather than like once I can get those 3 things done today, at the end of the day, I'm still giving myself lashes because I feel like I didn't get enough done.
Yeah.
So let's walk this back a little bit, because one of the things I think I wanted to come back to was this career transition that you had. So you moved to California, you had a corporate role that you were successful in. Then you started the blog, but then how did the rest of this business that you have develop? Because you have a podcast, you do one-on-one coaching, which I would like you to go, dive a little bit more into what exactly that is. I know that you have an online course that you've developed as well. So walk us through, like, how did that all happen, Marisa?
Yeah. So we moved, I was working, started writing the blog, had a personal goal because I love to write. So had a personal goal that I really wanted that blog to become a more tangible resource. And so wrote my first book. How did I write my first book? While I was juggling, corporate leadership positions, being a spouse, being a wife, adding to our family, all these things. I set consistent, reasonable goals. I mean, literally how I wrote that first book, besides the fact that I was working with a coach, I'm a big fan of coaches. I've had a life or a business coach pretty much on standby since 2015 in my life. But I set a reasonable goal. I said, okay, I'll write for 30 minutes, 3 nights a week. And that's how I'm going to get this book done. So pretty much each and everything I've been able to accomplish has been by a little bit of discipline, but also grace and sort of like keeping it real, right? Because let's get real. Like when you have kids, when you're a parent, when you're juggling a career, when you're juggling other responsibilities, other hats that you wear, you can't just, even if you're so motivated one day, like you can't just go full force in. You have other things that you're doing. So it has to be something reasonable that's going to work with your lifestyle, but keeping that consistent and ongoing is really key. And even the most self-motivated people out there, they can really benefit from working with an accountability partner, which to me has always been a coach that I've been working with. And I've worked with several over the years.
Yeah, I think you hit something on the head there as far as like motivation. It's not a finite resource. It gets depleted pretty quick. And listening to you walk through that, I recall the conversation that you had with Lori Oberbrockling on your podcast, who's going to be a guest on my show as well, about walking through like how you guys both, put your books together with, managing full-time job, careers at home. But yeah, I completely agree with the notion of motivation will eventually run out. And if you don't have a system or a process in place to carry you through the day, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, 1,000%. And just being in alignment. Being in alignment is so important. So when I say that, I mean, like, is this working for you? So I've had to really check myself. It's during several seasons, pretty much with any transition you go through. I think this is a really good self-check. So from that point on, I was still working in the corporate world. Then we added a fourth baby to our family. Time for a reevaluation. Like, how's this working for me? Okay, it's working. Then the pandemic hits. What's working here? What's not? Like, you really just need to sort of reevaluate. And my goals were always there. And sometimes they had to be shifted a little bit. Sometimes they had to be delayed a little bit. I mean, truth be told, starting that podcast was a 2020 goal. A lot of things shifted in 2020 for a lot of people. So that podcast came out in January 2021, fashionably late, but it still happened because it felt aligned for something I wanted to step into. And then, there came a point in 2021 where the juggle had been working of the side hustle, main hustle life. And then it didn't feel like it anymore for me. And it was really just my passion was really rooted in how my business was going and what I was building. And so super hard decision because a lot of my identity had been tied to that, successful career. But I stepped fully into my business at that point. And, then you transition again and you kind of self-check yourself.
I think that's another reason why people, even though they have good intentions or are motivated, to use that word again, to make a change, like say in their corporate career, their identity is still so wrapped up or tied into, that current role, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
I know people that are miserable in their careers that would want to make a change, but I think that's another thing that's difficult is like that unknown. And I see it a lot when people show up at my office for the first time, from a financial planning perspective, is people are so afraid of the unknown that's all they focus on. And when you can kind of peel back and start opening the door to what's possible versus not knowing, the relief comes off really, really quick. And I think that's the struggle that I see people go through often is the devil they know is better than the devil they don't know. That makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because I was just actually working with a coaching client of mine. And most people tend to go down that path, the what if path of all the things that could go wrong in the situation. But they give very little, if none, attention to the what if of the possibility.
Yeah. What could go right?
So, yeah. So I challenged her and said, you can totally run through all those what if could go wrong scenarios. And then you have to give the equal amount of time and energy and focus on the other side of that. It's only fair.
So I've had several different coaches and different kinds of coaches. And I think that's one of the things I think in your industry from a coaching perspective, people may have this stereotype where they just broad brush everybody the same way. But what I've learned when it comes to coaching is everybody's different and everybody has their own uniqueness or strengths and niche. Like I think you primarily work with moms. So walk us through what it's like working with you on a coaching basis, one-on-one. Like for I think, and I know a lot of the moms that listen to this podcast don't work with anybody. I think, and there's several that I know that could really benefit from working with somebody. But again, it's getting them over that hump and really letting people know like how coaching works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, working with me is awesome. I'll lead with that. So I'm a certified intuitive life and business coach. So I bring intuitive elements into my practice. What does that mean? It means we go deep. Like we're going to focus on you getting really comfortable making those decisions coming from your own expert decision-making core of who you are, using your intuition, using that guidance, tapping into the subconscious here and there. And we're going to keep it real too, because I'm walking alongside you pretty much in the same shoes you're wearing, juggling all the things, kind of lots of distractions around us, lots of, responsibilities. So I think it's a good combination, especially with me, of like the practicality and the hacks and the accountability and things like that. And also the kind of the core understandings of just, why are we doing that habit or making those decisions? Because the more we understand and like the self-awareness piece, I think it's the most undervalued thing out there. Like, why are there not college courses being taught on this? Why is this not more of a thing? It's like the best kept secret. So.
Yeah, I feel like lately in the articles that I've been writing, it always starts with awareness. And that's, you talk about, clarity is a prerequisite. I think that clarity comes from being self-aware. Now, that doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing every time, but being aware of it is a big first step and probably, a third, if not half the battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to coaching, is it a like a lifelong engagement, or is it like a specific amount of time that you normally work with somebody? Or explain how that works, because I think I've gotten a lot of questions on that when it comes to specifically with coaching. I know every coach is different, but how does that work with you?
Yeah. So sure. Can it be a lifetime commitment? It sure can. I wouldn't recommend going into it from that perspective, right? So I'd say for me personally, when I start working one-on-one with clients, it's either one of two ways. If they're going through my time management program, this is a 4-week program that has the option to work one-on-one with me as one of the, kind of the tiers of that program. And that's weekly for 4 weeks. What I often see when people do that is then they want to engage more long-term. So if you wanted to just start with coaching without that program, or you just wanted to continue on, we do 6-month increments. And during the 6 months, we meet twice a month for an hour on Zoom like this. And then in between those meetings, we do accountability check-ins on a voice note app called Voxer. And then because I want to be available and I want to be a resource, and things don't always come up during those meetings and during those accountability checks, my clients always have access to me on Voxer on that whenever things come up throughout the lifetime of our engagement together. So that's how I structure my programs. For clients who sort of like graduate from that phase and feel like they want to do more of a maintenance package, we'll meet monthly. But I always try and do like a 6-month increment, because I think 6 months is like a fair amount of time to see some real significant change. You could absolutely get results sooner than that, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes you walk into, sign on to work with a coach and you're like, this is what I want to focus on. And then by session 2 or 3, that's completely shifted.
Yeah. It's out the window.
Yeah. And the only advice I'd say really for anybody listening who's maybe not tried coaching, or, this is a new concept to them, because it's still kind of new out there, is get on a call before you commit to working with someone. If they offer that opportunity, like hopefully it's a free call. If it's not, it's worth probably paying for before you sign on for a longer term commitment, because you're going to get so much more out of that relationship if you really vibe with that person.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things. And even like when people come to me as a financial advisor, I ask, well, have you talked to anybody else? Even if they're from, referred from an existing client, it's still always good to, talk to somebody else and just and to make sure that you have that fit. Because I know my style of wealth planning is, different than somebody else's out there. Like I really try to focus in on I focus just as much on the emotional side of financial planning than I do the financial side of financial planning. And for some people, that's like, whoa, that's too much. Like, I did not expect for you to like ask about, how our, the internal workings of our family. Well, why is that important? Like, why do you need to know that? Well, because if things aren't good at home, how are you expecting yourself to make good financial decisions, and vice versa? How are you expecting to make good career decisions? So, again, it gets back to this tie that I have, that financial planning is just not financial planning. It involves every aspect of your life, both personally, professionally, from a parenting standpoint, as well. One of the, and we may have kind of hit on this, but how do you go about, Marisa, creating, I guess, and I'll use the word harmony again, between family, your career and business, and in your overall needs as an individual? Like, how does all that come together for Marisa?
Well, I'll never forget this question I got once on a job interview years and years ago. It was a dad who was interviewing me, working dad, and he asked me, talk to me about your work-life balance. And then he quickly corrected himself and he said, I mean, work-life pendulum. And I never forgot that, because that's what it feels like, right? It feels like
Yeah.
some days it's, 80% family, 20% work. Other days it's 90% work, 10% family. And, I don't know if you ever necessarily hit the 50-50 spot consistently. And I
I
think
would
that's
argue you
okay.
don't.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think it's okay. I think if you can look back on your week or your month, even sometimes a week is pretty rough, right? But your month, and just think like, okay, I'm feeling good about where I'm at. Like overall, I feel balanced. The internal part of me feels like this is working. It's kind of like what I mean with alignment too. When you're misaligned, everything starts to feel hard. Work feels hard. Tasks at home feel hard. Conversations feel hard. I mean, like things that maybe you even enjoyed in a different season of your life are like really challenging to get through. So really having that internal alignment of feeling good where you are. And if you don't have it, there's no shame. There's nothing wrong. Like you're okay. You can get past this. But what's it going to take to get you to a space of that? Is it a career change? Is it, giving more attention to your self-care or your hobbies or your interests? Is it working on your relationship? I mean, fill in the blank. There's a million things that you could be lacking there that maybe you just need to have the clarity so that you can focus on those things.
When you're meeting with people one-on-one, like how, are there, and now that you've been doing this for a long time, are there things that you can do to get yourself back into alignment? Like, are there certain, I hate to use the word hacks, but like, are there like, one or two concrete things that somebody can take away from this conversation and think, okay, I can go and do this or that will help maybe get my mind rearranged and pointed in the right direction again?
Yeah. So firstly, identify what those areas are if you can. If you can't, then create some white space where you can give yourself, 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes to just let your mind be free to have those things come to you of what those need to be. So identifying what those areas are and then giving yourself really reasonable expectations of how to achieve them. So let's say it's something like, I feel resentful. I never have time for myself. I'm always doing for others, and maybe that's where you're feeling kind of misaligned. Okay, well, what is something nice that you can do for yourself today that takes 5 minutes or $5 or whatever it is? Rinse and repeat. Let's put that on your calendar. Every single day, you're going to have this 15-minute block. You're not going to get booked with a meeting. You're going to get up from your desk. You're going to go do something that fills your cup in that moment and do that consistently. I mean, these don't need to be like huge things. These can be really small habits that you implement into your life.
I think that's probably a fitting way to get to my closing question that I ask all of my guests,
Okay.
which is, what is the best thing about being a parent?
Ooh. stumped. Such a good question. The best thing about being a parent. All right, I'll tell you what's came to me this morning before I even knew I was going to get this question is it's like an oxymoron, right? So it's exhausting and yet exciting, like all in the same millisecond. I mean, it's like everything encompassed into one. And it's just the most rewarding role I've ever had.
One of the things that Teresa has told me over the years, as she tells new parents, is welcome to the hardest job you'll ever love.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty apropos. So, well, Marisa, again, what's the best way for people to find out about your work, your podcast, and blog?
Yes, best way is my website, mamaworkit.com, MAMA, and tons of free resources on there. We send a weekly newsletter. I should say I send a weekly newsletter. I write it. And yeah, it's just a great place to connect, to get some good information, relatable stories, hear from our incredible guests and all that good stuff.
Well, terrific. We will make sure that we put a link to that in our show notes. Marisa, it's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I know a lot of the working moms and dads will take a lot out of this conversation.
Thank you. It was so great to be here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast. Please visit tamacapital.com to subscribe to this podcast or to connect with certified financial planner and registered investment advisor Paul Fenner of Tama Capital. And please join us again next time on the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast.